Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. And welcome to Land That Job, Resume Writing, Cover Letters, and Interviews. This is the very first collaborative event between Bay Area Emerging and Museum Professionals and the Association of African American Museums Emerging Professionals Group. My name is Asia Simmons. I'm the president of Bay Area EMP, and I'm excited to be moderating this panel with Lance Wheeler.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you all here this afternoon. Like Adrian just said, I'm Lance Wheeler. I'm the chair of the EMP group for AAAM, which is the Association of African American Museums. I quickly want to thank President Asia Simmons and her fantastic team, Dimitri Braxton, Austin Winnecki Wang, Naomi Neal, and my awesome team, Jessica Kelly, Treca Lopez, and Brandon Nightingale, for working hard to put this event together for us this afternoon. I would also be remiss if I don't thank our panelists. And so thank you all for joining us this afternoon. But I also think it's really important to get us grounded and take a deep breath and take a step back for a moment. Last year, with all the events that took place this summer, this year, how the new year started, I think it's important for us to be humans and take a moment and end that. But as museum professionals, as historians, as cultural workers, I think I want to say you all are important. Whether you're an EMP, whether you're a mid-level professional, whether you're a seasoned professional, the work that we do is important, and the work that we're going to continue to be doing is important. And so once again, thank you all for being here today. And I'm going to pass it to my dear friend Ahmad.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the Bay Area EMP and AAAM EMP for having this program and inviting us to come. Very important topic, especially now, with landing that job. So we're going to do a little discussion about cover letters and resumes and interviews and things of that nature. And as the resident old person on the call, I will go ahead and start, as I did this process starting out a long time ago, where you just had to keep sending out actual paper resumes and and turn in things that people had to read. So as someone who entered into the professional job field, or at least this field in the museum field in 1999, the world has changed a lot since then. And so what I will take with my time for those who are watching and trying to figure out how to get to that next level, either at manager level or getting in the foot in the door as someone who's coming out of school or trying to move to an executive level. The first thing that I would say is this: do not undersell your experiences. Because when I came into the field, and I have actual, like, quote unquote, museum training. I have a museum studies master's degree from Hampton University, go HU. And there was not a lot of people who had actual museum training. You know, I was working with people who were CPAs, folks who were teachers, people who had backgrounds in business. And so I think that thing that you worked on that you don't think is important to that museum job, it might actually be, because folks want to see how well-rounded you are in your experiences. Now, I had a chance to do a lot of things going into my first gig when I was actually ducking teaching. It ended up in the education department of the history museum, so I was still teaching. But the things that the internships that I had taken, the projects that I worked on, they all were kind of feeding into that level. But once I got into the field, I realized how many people did not have that background. And so because the museum field is like a Swiss Army knife, you got all kinds of things happening. Do not automatically disqualify a work experience that you had because you don't think it fits. There's going to be some opportunities for you, depending on what job you're going after, where they want to see, okay, you worked in that daycare, but you're working at an education department at a museum. I mean, you have experience with young people. You know what I mean? Or if you know how to do budgeting because you did do that internship at a financial office, sometimes that stuff is going to be necessary. So don't automatically get rid of the stuff that you think you need to get rid of to streamline your resume. Now, I'm going to say something that might be unpopular for people. I do not believe in the one-page resume. I know that's blasphemy. I know that's blasphemous because you've always been taught, hey, you gotta get it down to one page and make sure it's streamlined. I need people to see what I did. I did that same thing too. I had the one-page resume because people told me that's what I needed to do. And the further along I went, I'm like, you know what? You're just gonna have to disqualify me. Because I need you to see all the things that I worked on. I need you to understand what kind of person I am. I want you to see how dynamic my background is. And so not one person has ever complained to me about the size of my resume. Okay. And as someone who will be high, I did do the thing I was supposed to do up front. I am the executive director for the historic Mitchellville Freedom Park on Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. And eventually I'm going to be hiring people for a new cultural attraction. Mitchellville is the first self-governed town of formerly enslaved people in the United States, founded in 1862 on Hilton Head. And so I'm in a position where I'm looking at people now. We're at the ground floor. And so I'm looking at resumes. I am never going to turn around a resume because it's more than one page, because I'm looking at what you have done. And as someone who has done some hiring over the years, I am more interested in your direct relationship to the job that I'm trying to push and how well-rounded you are. I want to see the things that you've done with your time. I'm even interested in that internship you thought was a throwaway, because it's telling me how you are. When we get to the interview section, I'm looking at your judgment, not just what you put on your paper. I got to tell this story, and I'm looking at my time, make sure I don't go over. It was for a internship. So it wasn't, it was a youth internship, high school level. So it wasn't like it was a professional job. But I had an applicant came in, she dressed the part. She was really dynamic with her answers. She was chewing gum in the interview. And so when she left, I didn't say anything because it was a group of us. I walked out behind her. And I got her attention. I said, young lady, listen, that was great. But as long as you draw breath, don't you ever go into another interview with anything in your mouth besides teeth. Okay. That's something we shouldn't even say to professionals. But you would be surprised. Some of the interviews as a mid-level manager that I had to see, people came in like they kind of just left the club. Folks who walked in who did not have an idea what the job was for. There are people who don't take interviewing seriously, or they get so nervous that they can't handle it. And it's the same thing with your resume. And your resume and your interview style should mirror. I'm gonna say that again. Your resume and your interview style should mirror. All right. Now, when you get to the interview, I want you to give me more than what you gave me on the resume, but I should be able to see, after looking at your resume and then listening to you in the interview, okay, it lines up. Because some people lie on their resumes, y'all. Okay. And we need to make sure that these things line up. And people will actually check your references. So please make sure you have good references who won't kill you. I actually called a reference and they deep sixed the candidate. I mean, bombed them. I don't know what happened in the meantime, in between time with them putting that person as a reference, but it did not go well. And so that person did not get hired because they were more than honest with me about their qualifications. So make sure you listing people as a reference that you have people that you trust. Or who have your best interests at heart. I think I saw a message in the chat about do I recommend a minimum page for resumes? You don't want to, unless you're doing education or you're doing something that has expansive situations, I would guard against doing a CV, one of those large expanded CVs. You can do a CV, but just don't do the 30-page one. I think 2 to 3 is your limit. You know, I've been in the field for 21 years. My resume is 3 pages. So that means I did have to carve some stuff out and streamline to make sure it makes sense. I know that for government positions, they want you to put the numbers. You got to do that kind of stuff. If you are looking at positions in the field and you maybe government positions, you want to go to USA Jobs. For those who don't know that already, go to USA Jobs, make yourself an account, because you got to follow some instructions to get those government positions. You're going to have to put the number for the position at the top, the object, all that good stuff. I am not someone who is really looking for your objective. You know, people like to put the objective up top. I'm non-traditional. I know if that's what you do, don't stop it. But you want to make sure you're giving important information out the gate. On my resume, I have a little paragraph that states my experience as a 20-year museum professional, the things that I do, my background. I'm getting that straight off the rip, so you know before you go even deep into my experience, you know what kind of person I am out the gate. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get this question as we begin though. Is there a limit on how far you should be going back experience-wise? Also, is experience in the service industry or retail relevant? In the museum field, it depends. And I got about a minute, so I'll make this quick. It depends on what you're going after. How long should one bullet point be on a job? I'm thinking 1. You just 1 line for your bullet points. I don't have anything. The only thing I have from my college experience is an internship that fit. Okay, it put me into a different level. Okay, and so it depends on how far you go. I've been in there for 20 years. You don't want to go list stuff from high school now, unless it's something incredible, you know, like Lonnie Bunch worked on a project with you, then you list that. Okay, but other than that, you want to leave that where it needs to be. And what I would say in closing before I pass off to my friend LaNesha, and we're going to ask that when it comes around that you would introduce yourselves and let us know who you are, since, you know, everybody might not be aware. The most important thing I would say as part of this initial conversation is be yourself. Okay, people can see it if you're putting on an act. Okay, it's my job to study people. It's one of the things that I do, and I know you're not being your authentic self. And people who are looking for folks who they're going to be entrusting their organizations to are going to do that too. So be yourself. Now, if you are, depending on your personality, you can ratchet it down a little bit, but you still need to be your authentic self, because that's what's going to help you get the job. That's what you're going to be able to give to people once you get into the position, if you get to the position. So always be authentic. Tell the truth. If you don't know the answer, there's a way to get around not knowing that answer. Okay, there's a way to make your weaknesses look a little different, but you got to be real when you're in front of folks. And with that, I'm going to hand off to my incredible colleague and sister, LaNesha DeBardelaben, who has a wealth of knowledge for you as well.
Thank you, Brother Ahmad. You always set the bar high with everything that you do. We are just so delighted to be here with you. Thank you, Ahmad. Bay Area EMP and AAAM EMP, thank you all so much for having us and for hosting this. As the National Board President of the Association of African American Museums, I am so proud of AAAM EMP, Lance Wheeler, Jessica Kelly, and the entire AAAM EMP's. Kudos to you all for your leadership and for providing what the field needs and partnering with Bay Area EMP. We honor you all today. And I'm also executive director of the Northwest African American Museum in the historic Central District of Seattle, Washington. And our focus is to lift up Black lives, Black brilliance, and Black wellness. We aim every day to advance justice and equity, cultivate educational empowerment, and center and celebrate the Black arts and Black artists. And we just believe in changing the world through anti-racist education, cultural heritage, inclusive history, and the power of the arts. Education is at the center of who we are and what we do, because we believe in the words, the wise words of Frederick Douglass, who said that it is easier to build strong children than to fix broken adults. We have witnessed that and seen that time and time again, most recently as this week. And so I am happy to be here on behalf of NAM and AAAM. And I have been hiring for about 15 years now in the field. I've been in the museums field for about 20 years now and have been in a hiring role for about 15 years. I have served on national search committees. And I wish that I had this kind of panel discussion to listen into when I first entered the field, because there is so much carefulness that has to be given to the presentation of self in an application process. And the words that Ahmad has already shared is full of so much practical wisdom, starting off out the gate. Resumes definitely need to have a max cap on them. And I do believe that a 2 to 3 page resume is ideal. 1 to 2 pages if you're just entering the field, or if you're in your first 5 or so years, and then as you gain experience, adding that additional page, but not letting it go over 3, I think is just a wise maxim to always keep in mind. My resume is 3 pages, and like Ahmad, I've been in the field since about 2000 or so, and we have held leadership roles and have been involved in national service. And so 3 pages is, it allows you to prioritize what is most important and what would be most relevant to present to a search committee. So you do have to be selective with your experiences and your background, and what's most important will rise to the surface and will appear on those 3 pages. And I would also just say in my introductory remarks before we get into conversation with the colleagues here, is just never send anything out without first reading it aloud 3 times to yourself, whether it is your cover letter or your resume or a writing sample that many organizations require for some positions. Whatever it is that you are submitting, read it aloud, not just scanning it, skimming it, and editing it with your eyes, but read it aloud 3 times. And then after you've done that, put it aside for a day, come back to it the next day or a day later, and then read it again. That oral reading and review will help you to see things that you just don't see with your eyes when you're reading it. And then have another person to edit it. Send it to someone that is going to catch things that you may not have caught, or will see a new and a more effective way of saying something or presenting something. So find someone that you trust, send it to them, ask them to give you critical feedback on your application material. And then another good practice is to move it from Word into perhaps an email document, to copy and paste it somewhere else that will catch additional spell errors. Spell check in at least 2 different formats. Because one thing that I noticed was, even in my bio, Word did not catch the term exhibition that was misspelled until I placed it in email, in the text of an email. And the little squiggly red line appeared under exhibition, the word exhibition, and Word did not catch it. So just be sure to triple check everything before you send anything out, because I have sat on review panels for job openings. And when I interact with certain individuals, they present themselves well, they are polished, and I just knew that their materials were going to be meticulous and excellent and stellar, but they were not. There were places for improvement and lots of carelessness in their material. And I just think that those errors could have been avoided if they just took the time to give attention, meticulous attention, to the preparation of materials phase in an application process. So I look forward to having dialogue, answering questions, and I will pass it over to Lisa now.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Sasaki. I'm the director of the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center. The center is been around in the Smithsonian for a while. We were created in order to tell diverse stories in an institution that had not been telling and elevating the voices across multiple different areas. And that's where our center came into being. Right now, we currently don't have an exhibition space. We're working on that, which means that we get to do programs all across the world and online. And we do that by engaging with communities, artists, and scholars from all across the world in order to be able to look at the Asian American and Pacific Islander experience. So I'm really glad to be here today to talk a little bit about this topic. And I'm just, what LaNesha and Ahmad has already said is so great. So I just wanted to kind of touch on a couple of things that haven't already been spoken about. It goes back to a little bit of my experience in the world. One of those would have to be, I was sharing this earlier, when it comes to the package that you create, I know that it's really, really tempting to just sort of recycle. I think a lot of people have this idea that more is better, like the more resumes, the more jobs that I get to apply to, the higher that my chances will be. And I actually have an example where somebody did that. I received, when I was hiring, a document, a Word document, where the person hadn't actually switched off track changes and saved it and sent it to me. So I had the document where I was literally seeing where he had swapped out, I am uniquely qualified for this job, and swapped it out for another position. And I'm so excited. I've always wanted to work at this institution, and it swapped out that institution. And not only, I'm sure, was it horribly embarrassing for him, I did feel really compelled just to send it back and let him know that that was what was happened. And I learned from that to always save whatever you're sending in as a PDF, not as a Word document, or as mentioned before, put it into the email itself, just so that you're not having something like that occur. But it also said something else to me, which is he was really considering these jobs to be interchangeable. And like Ahmad, I sort of have been in the field now for 20 plus years. We'll just leave it at that. I did enter it around 2000. And, once, I became a hiring manager, I had started going from where we had special paper. We used to send in and, print out your resume and your cover letter on special paper, put a stamp on it, send it in. Now we're getting things via email or through places like Indeed, where somebody just has to hit a button multiple times and they're sending their resume out. So where I used to get, probably when I was starting as a manager or supervisor, I would used to get maybe 10 or 15 applicants for a single position. I'm now getting 150, 200 applicants for a single job. So one of the things I would have to say is, instead of going the route, although it's tempting to do more, I would say put your effort into making sure that your materials really are tailored to the jobs that you really want. It's worth the extra time to go through and do things even to your resume. So I think there was a question earlier, and Ahmad answered that, where how many bullet points under each job? Yes, 1 or 2 bullet points, but make sure when you're editing that those bullet points directly relate to the qualifications and the requirements of that job. Because I've had it now, especially at the Smithsonian, we're part of the government system, so USA Jobs. I've had people disqualified for jobs we were going to offer for them because their resume actually didn't track and didn't specifically list a job, one of the job requirements or the qualifications. So be sure to go back and just sort of double check against the position description to make sure that what you're editing out isn't actually the experience that the hiring manager is looking for to hire you about. The other thing I was going to mention was about the cover letter. And I know that that's something that might be going the way of the dodo bird, as again, more of these places like Indeed and LinkedIn are starting to allow you just to send places your resume. But I'm a big believer in a cover letter because it's a page, and I would say please keep it to a page, maybe a page and a half, where you get to actually be yourself. And to Maud's earlier point, this is your opportunity where many people may have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree or similar experiences that you do, but this is your opportunity to really distinguish yourself in there. And it's really easy for me after reading probably thousands of these to tell when it got copied and pasted off a template online or that you're reusing the words. What really strikes me and where I start to pull people out and put them maybe into an interview pile would be places where that they're really authentic, where they're saying why they want to have this job and why work at this particular institution. I know that there's a lot of museums out there. There's a lot of great nonprofits. And so why is it that you want to be able to work at this organization, referencing the mission, referencing programs that have inspired you, just demonstrating that you have some connection. It shows to me that you're really going to be the type of person that I would want to have on my team even before I have the opportunity to meet you. So take that opportunity of that cover letter and the passion that I know each and every one of you has for working in the museum field, and making sure that that shines through in there when it might not necessarily shine through on a resume or even a templatized cover letter. So that's what I have. I'm going to throw it over to PJ for his words of wisdom now.
Thank you, Lisa. And again, thank you for the invitation to join here. I'm really excited to be with everybody and to learn, and also, to listen. And I think, this is hiring and looking through, candidates and thinking about, hiring and bringing people on is something that's relatively actually new for me. It's pretty recent within just kind of the last couple of years. So I'm really also paying attention and listening. I've been on the other end of looking for jobs and applications. So I've had more experience in that. So I'm also really listening in carefully. So just a little bit of a overview on my background. So I am currently the manager of youth development at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, which comprises of the De Young Museum and the Legion of Honor. Together, it's one of the largest art institutions in the city and also one of the most visited institutions in the country together. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I work primarily with teens, college age, and post-grad interns. So my experience is really looking at and working with young emerging professionals and those who are starting in the field. So that, what I'm going to be sharing is, going to be really coming from that experience. I have haven't been on the kind of top level hiring. So I'm really also paying attention. So my background, I started about 10 years ago interning here actually in museums here in San Francisco at the Fine Arts Museums, where I am now for free. This was, during that time where you could, you have to do internships. And then in 2012, I was part of the Museum Education Fellowship Program at the Brooklyn Museum, which was a year-long in a fellowship program for museum education specifically. And then after that, once that ended in 2013, I was a freelance museum educator in New York City from 2013 to 2017. I was working in, different institutions from small house museums to major institutions like MoMA. So it was really a varied experience. I was traveling from almost all 5 boroughs at that time. And it was really hard for me to transition from being a freelance museum education into full on roles. And that was something that I really struggled with. So I'm really interested in hearing more about that. And then in 2017, I finally got my first full-time position, and that was manager of youth programs here in San Francisco at the Contemporary Jewish Museum. I was in that role from 2017 until 2020. So at the top of last year, I got the role at the Fine Arts Museums, which is again, also where I started interning about 10 years ago. And so it really was a homecoming, and it really was, a kind of building that relationship. And so I'm going to leave with 3 kind of things that I really want to share before we open it up. And one thing for me in thinking about hiring and thinking about careers and professional development, I think one thing that I want to share is really developing real and lasting connections and relationships with folks, whether that's friends, mentors, former supervisors. I have a term called friend tours because they are friends in a personal level, but also mentors in professional levels, and those things kind of just get mixed up. But make sure that you have folks that you can turn to, that you trust, that can advise you, advocate for you, and help you go through and decide if this role, if this space is for you, if it's something, just kind of having your support group, your text chat, of folks that can give you and offer you real professional, but also, really quality information and advocacy. And I think this goes back to, not just during the job hunt and not just during the application or, the interview. This relationship needs to be maintained throughout, all year long. It's not just, hey, I'm looking for this job again. Can I list you as a reference? It's meeting with them, where are you? What are your career goals? This is where I want to be. How can you help me? How can we, let's talk about this. What are your thoughts? So really, those things, don't let those things begin when you're only looking for a job or when you're in the process of an application, and let them know, let these individuals know that this is how, what you are looking for, and that, they know your journey and they know your trajectory. So that's one. The second thing that I want to share is, when you are in that kind of interview space or moving forward, it should really be a real negotiation. You should you should get to know the institution as much as they're getting to know you. So ask hard questions. Are your values aligned? Are there commonalities? Is there a foundation that you can work with? And as what we've seen in museums recently, so really identify those key commonalities and key things, what is specific to you that you can bring to this institution, and how can this institution support you as well, and how have they done, how have they shared and presented themselves. So do your research. It is a negotiation. Yes, I know we all want a job. Yes, I know this is a challenging moment, but is it really worth it, to go through this process and then, for it to not, really be productive for you. So make this time, as a negotiation on both sides. And then the last part that I will just share, number 3, is really, again, highlighting your strengths, and what you bring to the museum. I think this is a very, special group of folks here, and I would just say that these institutions need us more than we need them at this point, at this time. And so create, those spaces in the language that they are looking for, the language that they understand. So what are those, extra knowledge, competencies, cultural competencies that you can bring into any of these institutions. So highlight those, but also highlight, how this organization, how you might, really inform this organization. And so, and create a clear trajectory, a narrative of what has led you and brought you to this space, to this moment, and to this organization. And be clear about that. So those are kind of my 3 things that I have developed for me, and I always tell folks that I'm working with to really take to heart. So I'm going to open it up.
I guess my question for the panelists really quickly, can you all, PJ and thank you, I think that was phenomenal. I think relationship building and networking is something that you should sustain before, just over a long period of time. And transparency, I go to Ahmad almost all the time, right? If I have a question, because it's about that building relationship. Can you all each touch upon that again for us? Just networking, building relationship, and how did y'all go through that process as emerging mid-level, and do you still do that today?
Well, I believe that writing is the most important hard skill, but warmth is the most important soft skill that a person can have. Just that ability to build genuine relationships, to really bring oneself when you are interacting with someone, whether that is to inquire about a position, ask to be mentored, enter into an internship, that you're simply coming with your full heart. Like, this is not just head work, this is heart work as well. And having just a genuine warmth about yourself makes that relationship building just easier and more long lasting. And it is, I think, the most important soft skill that one can have.
And I'll say that I know it's not easy to put yourself out there. I'm an introvert. Lots of people don't believe that, because over the years I've developed skills where I've built off of it so that a lot of my discomfort is on the inside, and hopefully people on the outside can't necessarily see it. So I always found networking and making that initial connection to feel really awkward. And it was difficult as a result for my warmth to sort of come out, and for me to feel like I was being genuinely myself. So what I would say is, one of the things in my background that really helped, and this is just a giant shout out to the Western Museums Association, is I was asked to be on a panel, and I was so honored, and I got to participate in that conference for the first time and realized I was being surrounded by people who were like me, right? They had the same interests, they talked the same language, I could ask questions to, and from there I join the program committee and start to volunteer with that organization. And then I was asked to be on their board after 6 years, and just stepped down from the board after being president of that association. So I think that those are one of those things where if you can find a place like an association, great ones here, the group that you're in right now, these are all networks to build off of and to maintain over time, because this is going to be your support system. The EMPs who you know now, one day, and I know it feels far off, but one day you're going to wake up and all of those people that you've created networks, they're going to be the executive directors. They're going to be the leaders of organizations, and they're going to be the ones that you've known now for 10 or 15 years. So I would say, think through what some of those opportunities might be. Don't be afraid to volunteer. And I say that because I know unpaid internships are definitely not the way to go. It's something that I think the museum field has taken advantage of for a long time, but I think that makes people steer away from volunteerism, and that makes me a little worried. You can volunteer your time and to get to know people, and dedicate part of yourself to institutions, and be able to meet some of those people who will know you now when your resume pops up, or let you know when a position comes open. And you can also feel good because you're giving back to some organizations. Obviously, you don't want to do that to the point that you're being taken advantage of, which is, I think, the route of some unpaid internships. But I think that there's lots of opportunities out there to stretch yourself and to make some of those connections.
Oh, I'll jump in. Lisa said so many good things there, and so did LaNesha. I'm just going to illustrate another point. I think the volunteering and joining organizations like EMP is good because, as she said, at some point you're going to see these people at higher level positions. I'm seeing it now as someone who came in, before the turn of the century, and now I got the folks who were with me, at the kids' table at these conferences, like they're running organizations now, and it's an easy thing to get some things started. Like LaNesha and I worked with 4 other organizations and did a virtual Juneteenth program last year, and that just because me and LaNesha was talking about something completely different. It was like, we should do, and so those opportunities will pop up. So you need to make sure that you're, if you are introverted, as Lisa said, that you are doing the things that you have to do to get yourself to a point where you can at least have those healthy interactions with people, because you got to sell yourself. I mean, you're never going to stop selling yourself. Okay. So I need to put that out there. And also something else that I will tell you, again, it goes against conventional norms. Even if you're in a position that you like, when people approach you about interviewing for positions, talk to them. You don't have to say, I'm taking the job. You don't have to sit down for a long extended interview, but you talk to them. Okay. Now, I probably speak from other directors on the line. We get stuff thrown at us quite often. I speak to them regardless. Now I tell them out the gate, let them listen. I like my situation here in South Carolina, but I like to hear what you got in mind for this, because at some point, maybe I want to look at something else, and this person is someone who, there's headhunters and organizations that are doing this kind of work. You want to make sure you have those kind of relationships. And just like Lance said, he comes to me for stuff. I can pick up my phone and text Deborah Mack and ask her questions, because that was the person who was helping guide me. And so you need to have those people. And I just, listen, at one point I was just walking up to people and talking to them, okay? And getting those kind of relationships and building, so they would recognize me the next time I was with them, then I can ask them the question. And before I hand off to PJ, do not be afraid to step out of the field to get the experience that you might need and come back. Okay, there are associated organizations. The humanities is broad-based, and you might even go into the business field for a while. But if it's something where you feel like, listen, I want to be an ED, but I need to get that leadership training, you might have to jump out. okay, and get that training, that managerial training somewhere else, so you're in your best position to go back in. Okay, there's a lot of folks who coming from for-profit and nonprofit and running organizations right now, if you didn't notice that. So you don't have to take a permanent vacation from the field, but in order to get what you need to get to bolster your own resume and background, sometimes it's okay to step out. You can still volunteer at the museum. You can still join these, go to these conferences as you know, certain level of membership that lets you do it. But you have to think about, what are you going to do to support your vision in your career? You need to have a vision for what you want to do with your career, or at least you know what kind of things that you don't want to do. And sometimes if you can determine what you don't want to do, it's going to give you the vision for what you need to do.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. And you know, when thinking about, I think, mentorships or folks who you might want to look up to, I think it's important to obviously have someone who is, has years and has experience, but also don't forget to look around you, right? Again, the horizontal kind of leadership, and I think more and more it's really practicing, and look around you and see, how you all can really support each other as well. And again, to illustrate the kind of relationship building that is required. I think I lived in New York for a few years again, when after my time, but every time I would come back to the Bay Area, for holidays or whatever it may be, I always let the folks that I worked with here, like 3 years ago, say, I'm in the area. I'm probably going to visit the museum anyway. Can we do tea? Can we do coffee? Just to really build that. And this was, thinking, I think, I wish I was really strategic, but you can't know what positions open up. Obviously positions will open up, but without that thought of like, I'm going to be in this space and I'm looking for a job, it's really, I want to see you. What have you been working with? Here's what I've been working with. I'm in the city for like a weekend, so really, really doing that work and not just showing up at the tail end and say, vouch for me, advocate for me, when honestly, they don't know you. They don't know your trajectory. They don't know your story. They don't know your journey. Make sure that it's someone who wants to root for you and not the other way. So that's what I'll say about that.
And so what is a way that someone could set themselves apart from other candidates, whether if it's an informational interview or after having an interview, you send a thank you note saying, thank you for taking the time to interview me? Does that really make a difference? And does that help someone stand out?
Yes. I won't leave it at that. Yes, it does. And I'll tell you, the people who, I started my hiring situation at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. I was there for 18 years. And so we had positions come up. I ran the education department. So I had a lot of frontline people, folks who were going to be dealing with the general public, who were going to be working with me. And the things that stuck out for me are the folks who asked me questions during the interview. Okay. Just like PJ alluded to earlier, but then they went deeper because they'd done the homework about what the organization was doing, and they asked some questions specific to that, or that was lining up with their personal goals. You should do that. Follow-up is good. You got to find a fine line between following up and being obnoxious, where you keep asking. You could turn somebody off from you if you're like, hey, y'all heard, you heard yet? What's going on with that job? And you're doing this every day. So you can set yourself apart specifically in that interview. That's really where you set yourself apart, because we want to see all of who you are in like a 20-minute period. I know that sounds crazy, but we want to get a good example of that, because that's the person you're going to be if we hire you. And so that's why I kept saying you got to be authentic. You got to give people, you have to sell yourself. And I know I'm jumping a little bit and I'm gonna shut up and let everybody go on, but I've been looking at the questions. I see so many people talk about anxiety in interviews, and I know we want to address that, but there are opportunities for you to get yourself prepared to do public speaking. But here's the thing that I tell you that somebody told me a long time ago, and I'll be quiet. And it's something I carry with me all these years. He said, you are the expert on you. Most of the time when you're talking, whatever your topic is, you know more than everybody else in the room that you're talking to. So if you get jammed up, no one is going to know that except you, right? And so if you created this intricate strip in your head and you fall off of it, then you start panicking, you're going to play yourself out of position. You will sell yourself for the rest of your life. You need to be the most impactful salesman in selling you, or salesperson in selling you. So keep that in mind. You can't get off of your plan of attack if you're talking about what you've done, because you lived it. Okay. Now there are courses you can take about professional speaking. I'm really big on that because I've been talking in front of people a long time. Do what you have to do to make yourself comfortable with professional speaking. Practice in the mirror, practice with other people, get yourself together so you can work on that anxiety. But remember, you are selling you. You are the expert on that topic. And so you got to be able to push yourself out there and talk about yourself in ways that'll get you where you need to go.
Yes, definitely all that Ahmad said. And for sure, send that thank you out within 24 hours of the interview. If you are serious about the job and you want to stand out, compose a thank you. These days, it's just an email. Compose an email and ensure that everyone on the interview committee receives that, whether it's going to an executive and asking them to send it to everyone, but be sure that you are sending them a thank you within 24 hours of the interview. That is just a practical practice of warmth and of thoughtfulness, and that will help you to stand out. And then another way to just go into an interview calm is if you practice meditation just for practical purposes, do that before the interview. Practice some deep breathing and just get centered before the interview, because you want to show up balanced with a level of enthusiasm and passion and energy, but also with poise and with calmness, because this work requires individuals who are going to be able to manage well under pressure, who will be able to think through problems and get to problem solving. And that interview, the way that you show up in the interview is the way that they will see you handling the job if they offer it to you. So just remember to be balanced by meditating before the interview if you can, and just presenting yourself in a way that shows that sense of curiosity for the job and passion for the job, but that you're collected and calm and poised at the same time.
And just to go off of that, is just to let everybody know that the interviewers, the people who are there to ask questions, they're not in a situation that they're trying to do a gotcha, right? They're not trying to ask you questions to put you in a hard spot. In fact, we're rooting for you. When people walk through the door, I am your biggest advocate. So instead of seeing that person as an examiner or as somebody who's an adversary, really go in thinking like, this could be my next boss. This could be my next mentor. This is the person who's actually rooting for me to be able to do a good job on this so that they can give me this job. And, just to sort of echo what Ahmad said is, if you're yourself and if you've done your research around the job that you're going for and the institution that you're going to go in for, there's actually not really a question that's going to be a curveball. This isn't a pop quiz. This is actually something that you can study for and get engaged with. So let me just take an example. If it's an organization and you're going in for a guest services role, scan through, see what the visitor experience looks like online. Have you yourself been a visitor to that organization? Have you seen how their visitor services interact? All of those things could give you really great insights of how you're able to have talking points that you can go in and mention. I've been here before and I really enjoyed my experience working when I interacted with your frontline staff. That's why I'm so interested in being able to be one myself. So those are things that I think if you're able to do, you can feel really prepared when you come in, which will help go to that calming point and to that point of Zen, where you're not going to feel like somebody's there to quiz you, which we're not.
I'll share like two things, and I know interviews are also not my strength. I get anxiety, and also English is not my first language, and so I get a little confused sometimes, especially in kind of really high moments. So I would just say that your role is also to listen. So listen carefully at the question. Actually, what are they actually asking you? And you are free to say, can you repeat that, or can you say it in a different way that I can understand, so that you're not just going off your first initial thought of what you heard or what so again. And that also means that you are taking notes, that you are listening carefully. If they did not ask you to share ideas or opinions on things, don't share them unless they're relevant. We didn't ask you, how can we update our system, or really pay attention and listen carefully into the question, and take a moment, pause, and ask them to restate. Can you restate that question for me? I'm not understanding. I will never judge people who ask me to repeat things or say it in a different way, because that has been my experience, and hopefully folks on the other end know that. So those are my tips.
Well, thank you everyone for all of your advice, wisdom, and tips. At this moment, we're gonna get into a couple of the Q&As that we have. There's a lot of great questions in the chat, and Lance and I are gonna filter through some of them. And Ahmad has already touched on one of them. So one of the main questions that I see here is, what are some strategies for people that suffer from anxiety during job interviews? Some people tend to get nervous and then they can't recall anything. What are your tips for that?
Well, I think LaNesha gave a great one about meditation before, and whatever gives you some Zen, you want to practice that before you go in for an interview. I think you want to get yourself in the calmest mode fashion. Listen, I'm one of those people who really don't panic. So I'm not saying that I don't get nervous about stuff, but my motto is that if you panic, you can't solve. And so you won't be able to solve, but you won't be able to answer questions. You won't be able to handle the situation if you panic. So you got to make sure that you're in a state where you can clearly hear and listen, like PJ said, and address what's being said from a space. And if you got to take a space, like a breath, and then give the answer, then you do that. Make sure that you're getting yourself together. And I also will say that there are ways to address certain questions. Now, I don't want people to do everything that I do, but somebody asked me about what I would do about a certain thing in a position, and it was more extensive than I should have gave during an interview. And I told them, like, I think you had to hire me to get that answer. Now, it depends on who you're interviewing with to let you do that. Okay, so just don't go out half-cocked doing that without, I had a little bit more experience in my belt, I could do that, right? But I think you have to put yourself, you're the commodity. And that question was going to be something that was taken from my commodity and said, hey, look, you hire me, you can get that. And so you need to be self-aware without being obnoxious and pretentious, but also understand what it takes to keep you calm. If you go through some levels to do that, and make sure you're going in, as LaNesha said, at a pace where you're calm and poised, because people are going to be looking for the amount of poise that you show in an interview setting.
I think one thing that that's coming for me and based on my experience is the anxiety is actually because you want to do this job. It shows that you're passionate. It shows that you're interested. And so if I were on the other side and somebody was not taking this seriously, they were not scared, nervous, they act like they know everything already, then I would really we can tell sometimes the nerves is because this is something that maybe you have been passionate about and is a position that is a good fit for you. So we understand that on the other side, and again, we want to be able to have a conversation with you. We want to be able to get to know you. So being transparent, saying that I'm feel this is how I'm feeling right now, really at the top, because we can also tell if you're faking it, there's so many ways, but know that nerves actually makes clear that you are interested in this role, or that this is something that is that you're interested in.
And two things. Number one, see it as a conversation. Don't even see it as an interview. Just change your whole perspective and just see it as a conversation that you're having with people, with other people. And then secondly, you are the CEO of you. As Ahmad said, you may be applying for a museum educator role or a guest services role, but at the end of the day, you are the CEO of you. And so make a list of, to build your confidence as you go in, make a list of the achievements that you have made along your path that that make you distinct from all the other possible candidates. Don't even think about them. Just focus on your path and the experiences that you've gained and achieved along the way. And just make a list of just 10 distinctions about you that you will take into this conversation with these other individuals. And then thirdly, while excitement sometimes anxiety is very much an emotion of excitement, for me, oftentimes it shows up as unpreparedness. I'm anxious because I'm not yet fully prepared. And so do all that you can to prepare in advance. As Lisa said, do as much reading as you can, delve into as many annual reports and 990s and whatever you can do to read about this organization that you're about to have a conversation with. The more you know, hopefully the less anxious you will appear to be.
And then the final thing I'll say is, I think every single one of us that you can see up here have had a disastrous interview. It happens. And if that's what's causing your anxiety, like you're so worried you're going to say something wrong or to do something, we've all been there. And I can tell you, nobody is going back and saying, well, this one time I interviewed Lisa and she said this. No, there's going to be a dozen people before you potentially, and a dozen people after you who will be interviewing. And whatever you might say, wrong I should say, isn't probably going to make a big impact. What will make a big impact, though, is when you are prepared, when you make that connection, when you have that conversation. In interviews, the positives tend to hang on as impressions so much harder and longer than the negatives. So just know that these things happen. We've all had them before, and it's not going to impact your ability to get the next interview, to get the next job. I know I've walked out of interview and beaten myself up for days afterwards saying, oh, if I had only just said this, only to realize like, no, I could have changed every single one of my answers and probably still not gotten that job because I just wasn't the right person for it.
I'm just gonna say one more thing. The other thing, that can also really show your strength and your preparedness is asking really specific questions at the end. That, shows that it's the other way around, right? They're asking you questions. This is your opportunity to ask them questions. Why is this? How does this organization, go, in alignment with whatever your value, like ask those really specific, pointed questions that will let you also know if you want to work for that space. It's not just them wanting to work with you. So, take that moment, when they ask you, do you have any questions? Always make sure to have questions, but also make sure that those questions are really specific and valuable for you and them. So let that last impact be, that impact rather than, you walking in with your nerves in the beginning. So you can turn that around in that last, set of questions that you asked.
I know we're moving on. Real quick, the first question I always asked when I was hiring in Birmingham, the first question, when's the last time you came here? So if you've never visited, you are already at a disadvantage. Or you came in 6th grade, you haven't been back since, but you want to apply for the job, you are already setting yourself up for failure. I'm putting a check by that, because you ought to have the common sense to come to the organization and visit before you go to an interview. Okay, and learn all you know about. Even if you hadn't been, just go walk around for a while, get laid and land before you go in for an interview, because some people want to know, when's the last time you visited this organization you want to work for or get paid from.
And if you're out of state, because I know this sometimes happens, you might not be able to financially afford to go and visit, but there are so many online resources. People have really great online presence now. So there's absolutely actually no excuse for you not to have seen a virtual program or to peruse their website or to have followed them on Facebook or Twitter. These are all really easy things that could substitute for that in-person visit if you're looking for a job in another state or in another country even.
Great points. Ahmad, you would have got me on that question, but I agree. I do recommend that you do visit the location or website, get your information, be prepared, because you just never know. And I believe in always having 3 general questions and then having really specific questions for the interviewer at the site that you're applying to. That's just my thought process. But we do have another question. I think we have a phenomenal question right now I'm about to ask you all. And it's about COVID-19. Has your hiring practices changed since COVID-19? And what are you expecting from a candidate since there's a pandemic? Do you make new assumptions? What are you looking for with this pandemic that we're in right now for your hiring practices?
Since the pandemic, we have not hired pretty much. The loss in revenue has really impacted, our entire budget, operating budget. And we did have to put our hiring processes on hold as we now get a sense of our grounding in 2021. We are going to be hiring in the new year. Pretty soon we'll be looking for an education and engagement director. And part-time digital media content specialist, and a grant writer, part-time grant writer. And so there are going to be hiring openings at the Northwest African American Museum. And we are at this time just trying to figure out how we will adjust to the hiring process in light of COVID and the restrictions that are on travel and face-to-face interaction. We certainly, anyone who is in the hiring process in COVID should certainly get accustomed to interviews on Zoom and on all the other platforms. So there's Microsoft Teams and all the others, GoToMeeting and so many others. So just to download, what I recommend is just download all of the platforms that an interview process may be held on, just to have immediate access to that, become familiar with it, so that when you show up for the interview virtually, that technology piece will not arise any glitches or any issues. And we likely will certainly be using Zoom as the platform for interviewing. But just about the other aspects of the hiring process will probably remain the same. But we're learning day by day through COVID how to grow our team.
I hope these people are paying attention, because you had someone who was in a director role just said she was offering for jobs. So for those 74 or so participants who are out here, now this is the best lesson for you. When you hear somebody talk about they got a job opening, you better find out where it is and how you can get connected. So I would assume somebody's going to reach out to Ms. DeBardelaben about a position, or at least to make some networking connections. That's the first thing you need to do after you get off of this call. We were going to hire a part-time development associate in the spring before everything shut down. So just like LaNesha, we had stopped. I made a determination that it wouldn't be trying to get anybody to try to help raise money at that time was not going to be it. We are reopening that, and it will be a hybrid situation. So it'll be someone who will spend some time wherever they are virtually, but they probably had to be somewhere near the area. So I think we've all had to get real creative. I think this is the time now where organizations like ours, you will see more virtual positions because they've had to work for the last 9 to 10 months in that format, and they've, some people have been successful in that way. So there'll be some positions where it may stay in a Zoom situation like this. So just be mindful of that. Like, the job market all across the country is going to change a little bit, at least the way we do work, given the fact that we couldn't be around each other. So just keep that in mind and make sure, like you do, like LaNesha said, and make sure you download GoToMeeting and Microsoft Teams and have Zoom available so you don't have any problems.
I'll just go ahead and say that the Smithsonian right now, we have a trust hiring freeze. So for those of you who don't know, the Smithsonian is bifurcated between the trust side, which is the nonprofit, and then the federal support, which is about 2/3 of our operations. The federal side is still hiring and will continue to hire because through appropriations, that particular side is very, very stable. Currently, we'll see how that goes as time creeps on. But what I would say is, both Ahmad and I have referenced USA Jobs. If you haven't gone in and signed up for that and haven't looked through that, that would be a great place to look for museum positions, not just for the Smithsonian, but also the National Park Service will show up there as well, and other federally funded positions. These positions are required to post for usually a minimum of at least a week. However, we're getting inundated because there are still places that are hiring. So like I said, 200, 300 applicants for a single position. So what I would say is if you do you go on there and you see something that you are interested in applying for, go ahead and do that immediately. Don't sit on it. Try to get in as soon as possible, and be sure that your qualifications match what they're asking for. Or the USA Jobs first goes through a system, an automated system. It actually isn't seen by a human being if you don't put in there the qualifications that exactly meets the requirements. So that's just a little bit of a tip. So if you've done this before and you're frustrated because you submitted a whole bunch of things, that's usually why. It probably hasn't even been seen by a human. But that shouldn't deter you. Just go in there, be sure that you're following all the exact rules that they're saying to follow in there, and you'll usually have a good chance of being certified as an applicant.
My organization actually has a few openings, but these are, I know, not anything that I would be hiring for. They're probably, in different departments. But, yeah, I think even as most institutions and organizations are probably on a low, hiring moment, I would just check and double, because you can't ever be sure. So, take a look around and see their websites. But also this could be a moment for you to start, to start your relationships and reach out to some of those folks who you've worked before and say, while museums are on a pause for hiring, how can I develop other skills? How can I develop this relationship, this connection? This is where I want to be in the next 2 years, the next 2 years. What does it take for me to get there? What are skills that I already have? So set up, that time and make sure to identify those folks specifically, and not just sending 30 of your email contacts and say, let's have coffee. So, yeah.
Great, thank you guys so much. So another question that we have is, how can I talk about my weaknesses by being humble and yet still seeming competent in my work? I find myself having a hard time to write about my weaknesses.
Transparency and honesty goes a long way. So just be truthful and honest about everything, including your weaknesses, because what that does is shows that you are willing to grow, that you are willing to get training, and that you are willing to work on being better and growing with the position. Someone who comes with arrogance, it's a turnoff. Someone who is just admitting that they don't know everything and that they don't have everything and that they're not bringing everything, but that they're willing to do what's needed to read more into. One thing that my mentor, Juanita Moore, always told us is to always be reading about your craft, about your arena, your field. Always be reading. And so just position yourself as a learner who is ready to learn more, ready to grow. And so that's my suggestion.
Yeah, self-awareness is an amazing thing. It's something that a lot of people don't always, they're not always able to demonstrate. And so I would say, yes, I have a weakness, but here's what I'm going to do about it is really impressive. So yes, I get nervous public speaking, but I've been joining Toastmasters, and I've been trying to present more at museum conferences. Those are things that says I'm aware enough to know that I have a weakness, but I'm actually working on it. And to LaNesha's point, I'm willing to learn and to work on it. It's also perfectly acceptable to say, I don't have experience in that. However, I'm willing to learn. And that's perfectly allowable.
I think this was, something that I struggled with, moving from freelance work into full-time work. Full-time positions and those who are hiring are always looking for folks who have done full-time work before. So how do you transition, right? How do you move it? So I think and that usually comes with, have you managed folks before? Have you supervised folks? So how can you get that supervision and management role if you can't successfully transition into that role? Right. And you're ready. I was, ready. I had years of gallery teaching, managing my work, and working with others. But I couldn't say that I was a supervisor for someone, and I was wanting to, but I couldn't because nobody was looking, so I think for me it was, again, yes, being clear, like I haven't had that opportunity to be a direct supervisor, a manager for people, but this is what I've done. This is where I've done leadership. I've managed projects before. I've collaborated with people before. I've gotten things done on a timeline that works. Even though, it wasn't a clear and direct supervision role. So, making them see that you can successfully in that, because it's a hard space. How can you get to that place without people giving you that opportunity to get to that place? And so sometimes a lot of it is just imagining more and really seeing you, and knowing that there's potential, which has a lot of, I know potential is such a fraught word because it culturally it changes, but I think, yes, being transparent and being able to also do, where have I been in positions where I've managed things successfully and do things, whether that's in museums or not. So yeah, I think there's ways to kind of really successfully move into that space.
The question has been answered by my colleagues here, but I will kind of piggyback off something PJ said, and it goes to another question I saw in the chat. Like, this might be the opportunity where their retail experience will pop up and help you, because they, hey, look, I haven't supervised people on this museum level, but I did do this in retail. I was a shift leader, X, Y, and Z, and I had to do those things. And that, I mean, you might think it sounds trite, but somebody like me is going to be like, okay, you've supervised people before. And supervision of people does not have to be related to the field. Like, if you can interact and supervise folks, then you are good. And sometimes the outside experience will work for you. I hired a outreach coordinator who I knew had to be around children. This guy was not a traditional teacher. Okay, I had actual teachers applying for the job, but his length and wealth of experience doing programs at a church school, okay, at a daycare, he had the experience, and so I hired him over the actual teachers, and that's one of the best hires. I hated it when he left to go to another gig. It was one of the best hires I ever made, because yeah, he wasn't in the classroom like these other folks were, but he had the experience. And so that's why I said earlier, don't undersell the experience, because we wanted to see that you can do the job. And sometimes your ability to do the job is going to outweigh all the stuff you got on your resume and all, the letters, and you got this in college and you were, summa cum laude. Okay, can you do the job? And that's what's going to help you.
And I agree completely with everything you all just said. But I think a big question that most people, when they get to the second round or the third round, how do you negotiate a salary? How do you try to get that paper, the bread, right? How do you make sure you get paid what you're worth? And so that's my question.
If y'all don't mind.
Research.
Yeah, that's the first thing. You got to find out what the field is calling for. And so it's hard to say what I'm about to say because, there's so much unemployment, but you got to set a baseline for yourself. All right. Now, if you got to have a job and you got to have it now, You do what you got to do. Okay. But if you set a baseline for yourself, and in anything that you're doing, folks, set your non-negotiables. Set your non-negotiables. And if you got a baseline salary that you are unwilling to go under and it's not going to kill you, well, give your salary. We can't meet that. Okay. And move to the next thing, because if you undersell yourself, then you do it again. At a certain level, you got to keep a level for yourself. Now, that whether that level is $27,000 or $100,000, you got to have a level for yourself. Do what PJ said, do the research, and then set your own parameter and ask for what you are worth. Ask for what's commensurate with your experience. And if they can't do it, then you might need to think about walking away.
And I would just say, though, also it's, I know a lot of museum jobs don't actually post the range. When you're entering into the second round of interviews, it is perfectly acceptable to say, I need to know what the range of the salary is, because that way, if the range doesn't hit that minimum, you can walk away, right? And you wouldn't have invested, and they wouldn't have invested all this time in it. Also look, though, at the upper end of that. I know that there's some schools of thought that says, you know, you should always go in and ask for the top end of the range or even above it. Museums right now are in such situations that usually when they post a range, they're not going to be able to go above it. And when you look at the top end of that range, that's for somebody who hits every single requirement and comes in with all this experience. So if you go in assuming that and I'll just make up the situation, I have no idea where you're at, but if you come in not meeting those requirements all the way, you're a really great person, but you don't quite have everything, but you go in assuming that you're going to be able to get that upper range, you're probably going to be disappointed. And that's when that back and forth negotiation gets really awkward, because you're forcing somebody to come in and say to you, I'm sorry, you don't have the experience to qualify for that. And it just starts to get, I think, really feels really bad for everybody. But if you've done your research, if you've asked that important question, if it's at that level, hopefully slightly above what you're hoping for, that means then that you can start to talk about these other things. The other thing to consider too is, don't just think about salary, also think about benefits. Most of the time, people just look at that salary number and they forget to ask, is medical covered? How much of medical? Is retirement, is there an automatic match? Ask those questions, because sometimes you may decide to go for a lower salary because the benefits are really great. You might get extra time off at Christmas. That means you don't have to use vacation time, because vacations really, and taking trips is really important to you, or being with your family if they're in a different state. So consider the whole package and not just the salary number.
Yep, and the last thing that I would add is just to talk to your trusted mentor about what should be in your package. As you apply, talk to a single trusted mentor who will give you just some good wisdom and guidance and insight. So make sure that you are realistic with your expectations and package requests.
And I just want to piggyback off of that really quickly. I'm in Mississippi. And so when I came to Mississippi, I'm from Jersey. So when I came to Mississippi to be the Civil Rights Museum here, I didn't take in consideration something so simple, getting a direct flight out of the state, right? There's no direct flights in Mississippi. So going through that process of negotiation and also looking at jobs, I want to tell, if you are EMP, do not just take a job just to take a job. Make sure that's a place that you want to live. You can live outside of your work. That's very, very important. And I would do it all over again. I just want to put that out there. But I think that's important. When you're applying to jobs, just don't go for the money and just don't say yes to the first job. Really think about where you're going and what does it look like outside of work.
I'm going to just share one thing. Sorry, I'm just going to share one thing. I've done, at that kind of management supervisorial level, there is ways that you can move and ask. And, I think at that level, if it's not hourly, you should always negotiate and see, what that space is for you, because it also sets up your long-term relationship with that institution and that space. If this is a space that is open to your professional development and to your growth, they may say no, not right now for few $1,000s. That's not going to make a big difference, but it will show. But they may be willing to provide, they might be able to say, we can give you X amount for professional development that you can seek on your own, to travel and go to these spaces. I mean, those are things, that would be nice to have outside of your salary, right? To go to conferences that require travel, hotel, can you promise me that that you can cover, 2 conferences a year? There are things, again, that are not just in that number, that you can show, that you believe in yourself and that you see your value, but can also be met halfway and not just, it's not like an all for nothing negotiation. So always think about those things too.
Well, thank you everyone for being a part of this amazing panel. I just want to remind all attendees that we have in the chat the emails for all of our panelists. If you have any questions, please feel free to email them. We have learned that there are a couple of positions that are opening up. If you want that job, just let them know I saw you on that panel. Please help me get to that yes pile. Yeah, and I just want to thank AAAM, Lance, and Jessica for being a part of this amazing panel.
And I want to say thank you to Aja Simmons and her team as well. And thank you once again. You heard what she just said. It's people on this panel who have job openings. So email them, okay? Just introduce yourself.
Yes, and this panel discussion will be live on our Facebook for the Bay Area EMP Facebook as well. And I'm seeing some questions about, will the unanswered questions be answered at a later time? We will gather the unanswered questions and we can email them out, and maybe we can start a thread, or we can start a chain discussion within the Bay Area EMP Facebook page as well. So we will let everybody know what we're going to do about the unanswered questions. All right, well, thank you guys so much, and everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
Take care.